If you've not tried a British golden ale, well, then you're in for a treat. It combines all of the characteristics of a good British beer, along with some of the qualities of an American pale ale. We're going to brew one up, and I'm going to talk about dry hopping using this gizmo here. In addition to that, I've got some exciting news about how you can follow along with the recipes right here on this channel. We've got a lot to cover. Let's get to it. Hi, I'm Martin Keane. I'm taking the Homebrew Challenge to brew 99 beers in 99 weeks, and no, it's not tasting time yet. I wanted to spend just a moment talking a little bit about dry hopping. Now, what is dry hopping? Well, dry hopping is where you add hops in after fermentation is complete. So this is something that goes into a fermenter or a keg after the beer is done fermenting, and its intention is to really add aroma and flavour to the beer. You're not going to get much bitterness from a dry hop. Now, I have brewed 37 beers so far in my Homebrew Challenge, and this is the first one that I will have dry hopped. So let's talk a little bit about the process. Now, back in the day, the way I used to do this was I would ferment in carboys, and I would let the fermentation finish, and when it was done, I would rack to secondary fermentation. So this is a 5-gallon PET carboy. I'd rack the beer into here so it's off the tube, and then I would add in my dry hops. These days I'm not even using carboys. I am brewing in SS Brewtech brew buckets. Now, this is a brew bucket, and when I want to dry hop in here, there are a couple of issues. Now, the first issue is this is a closed fermentation chamber when you put this on, but when you open it up, my goodness, there's a lot of opportunity for oxygen to get into there. So when you are adding in your hops after fermentation is complete, you really are introducing a lot of oxygen into the beer. The way that I get around that is, well, using something else. This, which is a tilt hydrometer. I put this in when the beer is fermenting, and what this does is it gives me a constant reading as to what my gravity is. And when my gravity gets to within a few points of my final gravity, that is when I crank open the top and drop the dry hops in. Now, you don't need a tilt hydrometer to do this, of course. You could just watch the bubbler and watch until it slows down, or you could take measurements every now and again, but this is kind of a high-tech, easy way to do it. Now, the advantage of doing that, of getting almost to your final gravity, but adding the dry hops at that point, is that fermentation is still ongoing a little bit. So any of the air that I've introduced, the oxygen that I've introduced into this fermenter will hopefully be eaten up by the yeast and come back out the airlock again. So I'm minimizing the amount of contact I'm going to have with oxygen in the final beer. Now, the second issue with adding hops into any sort of fermenter like this, where the beer comes out the bottom rather than is siphoned out, is, well, there is definitely the opportunity for the dry hops that you put in here to get stuck at the bottom and then clog this thing up. And look, when you add hops to beer and leave it there for a little while, they really do soak up the beer, and they can just take up a lot more space than you think they really would do, and it's very easy for this stuff to get blocked. So that is where I have another gadget, and that is this hop sleeve. So when it's time to dry hop, all I will do is I will unscrew this sleeve, I will put my hops into the sleeve here, and then screw this up and drop this in just before I've reached my final gravity. I'll also sanitize it as well. Now, this is a mesh around it, so the hops are able to get in contact with the beer, but most of the hop matter is going to stay inside of here, and it's not going to be blocking up my fermenter. So that is the plan for this brew. I have 1 ounce of hops that I will be dry hopping with, and they are going in this bad boy. Now, before starting the first beer in my homebrew challenge, I brewed a British golden ale quite recently, and it wasn't a style I was all that familiar with, but when I made it, it turned into one of my very favorites. So look, a couple of things to mention then about this beer. One is the recipe I'm using today does not veer very far away from that wonderful success from last time. And secondly, I'm abandoning my 2.5 gallon brews for today and brewing a good old 5 gallon batch. Now, British golden ale, clearly golden implies it's a light beer. We're going for an SRM of about 4 here. And we're looking for original gravity of 1051, which is going to be about a 5% beer. So in terms of ingredients, the main base malt is, surprise, surprise, Maris Otter, and that makes up 50% of my grist. The other 40% of the base malts, that comes from regular old 2-row malt. So this is just American 2-row, that makes up 40%. Now, the style guidelines do say you can also add sugar or corn or wheat to this style as well. So for the remaining 10% of the grist, I am going to add white wheat malt. I'm mashing in at 152 Fahrenheit for 60 minutes, looking for a pre-boil gravity of 1040. Now, as I alluded to a bit earlier, this is quite a hoppy beer. The style guidelines allow for the IBU to go as high as 45. I am going to go to 42 approximately with this beer. My bittering hop is a Fuggle hop, so these will give me 27 of those IBU. For my batch size, that happens to be 1.5 ounces. And for flavour and aroma, it's Target hops. So I have 1 bag of Target hops, which is going in with 10 minutes to go, and then this bag, which is going in for the dry hop. Now, I get all of the ingredients for my beer at my local homebrew store, which is Atlantic Brew Supply in Raleigh, North Carolina. Now, Atlantic Brew Supply and the Homebrew Challenge are going to partner up. And here's what we're going to do. For each beer that I make, Atlantic Brew Supply are going to make the recipe available in a kit form. So you can either go into the store if you're local to Raleigh, or you can go online, and with a single click you can order all of the grains, the yeast and the hops that you need to brew one of my beers. So if you want to brew this British golden ale, you can go and find the exact kit to be able to replicate that. If you're interested in doing that and you want to do that online, I've included a link in the description. Chilling the beer down to 68 Fahrenheit now, at which point I'm going to add my yeast. That is Wyeast's London Ale 3 yeast. This is the same yeast that I've been using in my English bitters as well. I really like the characteristics from this one. I've moved the beer into my fermentation chamber now. It did hit the expected gravity of 1051. So now I'm going to let it ferment a little bit before I add in the dry hopping charge. This beer is expected to drop down to about 1013. So when I get a few points above that, that's when I'm going to crack open this lid and put in the dry hops. It's been a few days now, fermentation has come down to a crawl, so it's time to take my sleeve, which I've been sanitizing, and add in the hops. So just a case of unscrewing this guy, put it back in the sanitizer for a sec, and then just pour these guys in. And then screw on the lid. I'm just going to drop this into the fermenter. Pretty cool to see that thing open. Right, so now I'm just going to leave it in there, and hopefully the remainder few points of fermentation that I'm going to get will clean out all of that oxygen, and we'll try the beer. It is tasting time. I have with me
Oliver.
This is my 10-year-old son to help me with this beer. Now, Oliver, using all of your beer expertise, could you tell me what you think about the appearance of this beer?
Well, what I see here is a gold to golden colour, which makes the beer look incredible.
Well, I really appreciate that. I agree. It is a nice golden colour. It's not fallen all that clear yet, which may be because of the dry hopping.
Yeah.
Of course, right? But yeah, no, it looks an appealing beer.
Yep.
And now for the aroma.
It's a herbal and earthy smell.
Why, yes, I believe it is, which is exactly in line with the BJCP guidelines.
Oh, really?
Floral, herbal, and earthy. As for tasting, sir, I don't believe you're 21 years old. So, that's better. Some orange juice for you.
Oh.
Cheers.
It has a really orange taste to it.
Yours one tastes a bit like orange.
Yeah, I don't know why.
Well, that is curious. As for this one, actually, this does have quite a fruity taste to it too, which is obviously a little bit of the result of the dry hopping. There's definitely a citrusy quality to this beer, so unlike some of the recent English beers, there really is none of that sort of amber or pale ale taste. This is very much a citrus forward beer.
Yeah, I agree.
As is yours. Yours is very citrus forward, right?
True.
Well, thank you for joining me on this tasting session, Oliver. Very nice job. Cheers.
I didn't finish it.
You were chugging for ages.
I know. I'm not there.